When it comes to stress, it's all about keeping responsibility and control together. And I learnt this many years ago when I was a psychologist in the education system. I looked over and looked at the school ground, and suddenly it all became clear to me, because I realised that the most stressful time I'd ever had was when I was a school teacher. As I was driving along, I looked over and saw this school ground, and what I'd noticed in the school ground is the school ground had a fence all around it. And it just struck me that, of course it's got a fence, because that fence is the boundary. And that fence is saying, within that boundary, the teachers are God. Well, they're not really God, of course, but they might as well be, because the teachers have all the responsibility in the world. They have to be responsible for everything. So therefore they've got to be in control. They've got to be in control of what sort of food you can bring to school, when you can eat, who can come to the school to teach you, who you can play with, who you can't play with, the equipment you work on, the toys you're allowed to bring to school or not bring to school, all of that stuff. Because they are totally responsible for you in parentis in loco. They're responsible for your safety, and they have to be concerned about that. And they have to be concerned that they're doing reasonable stuff. In fact, they have to be more responsible than parents are. Because if a child breaks their arm at school, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, whereas the same child can break that same arm at home, and they come to school next day with a sling in, no difficulty. Having looked at that, I could see how essential it is to keep control and responsibility together. So what happens when little Johnny jumps over the fence, does a runner? They're always called Johnny, by the way. I don't know why, but they are. So what happens when little Johnny jumps over the fence? Because suddenly he's jumped outside the sphere of control, yet the teachers are still responsible. But where Johnny is now, there's fast cars going past. There's unsavoury people out there. There's lots of things that can happen to someone outside the school during school hours when they're not being supervised. Yet those teachers are still responsible for that child. And that's going to be stressful. And they're really being set up until they do one of two things. They have to get the control and responsibility back together, which means they need to get Johnny back into their school ground where they're in control, or they need to give the responsibility to someone else who does have more control outside the school ground. That'll be either parents or sometimes the police or even the welfare authorities, whatever. But they need to let someone know, because if they don't, they're not only vulnerable, but they're stressful. And so, having looked at that model, it sort of hit me, well, stress is about keeping that level between control and responsibility. See, in a conversation, you're responsible for what you say. You're responsible for how you hear. Why? Because you've got total control of that. But you don't have control of how the person you're talking to reacts. You don't have control of what they go away and talk about. You have no control over that, so you can't feel responsible for it. Because if you do, you're going to give yourself stress. The idea is to be totally responsible for things you have 100% control over. And if you don't have 100% control over, either give it to who's got the responsibility, or get control. You have to keep control and responsibility together. Just like in the school ground. If they get separated, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for you and it's dangerous for the other person. This is the fundamental cause of stress. All this stuff that happens is the trigger to it, but this is the fundamental cause. The fundamental cause is when you start taking responsibility for something you have no control of, or when you hold on to control and try and make somebody else responsible. I know there's going to be stress around there. That's where breakdowns happen. I hope this helps.